Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Private Eye in July. It's now over. It's not July anymore, but I wanted to do one more video. I went to do all these things yesterday, and I got forestalled by rogue construction work. But this is an event created by Jim at Mystery and Mayhem. It's a month-long event in July to celebrate Private Eye fiction. And it's been a blast. I've been reading an enormous amount of Private Eye fiction in 2025 anyway. So doing it for a BookTube event felt even better. It felt just wonderful. And our guidelines are fairly simple. Your private eye must have his or her shingle out, more or less. They must accept clients and bill those clients. And they must also not work for law enforcement of any kind. And for my choice today to say goodbye to Private Eye July 2025, I'm cheating just a little, as I sometimes you have to do. I read a Marcus Corvinus murder mystery by David Wishart. These are set in ancient Rome. And Corvinus, he's an informer. He is he's not an informer anymore. He does solve mysteries. He does take inquiries. He does go on jobs for clients. The only way that I'm really cheating is that sometimes his payment is in kind. Sometimes his payment is to pay off an old debt. Sometimes his payment is to save his own skin. He'll do it or else. When he's dealing with the Imperials, for instance, Livia or Tiberius, that's definitely the reason. And that was the case with this book too. I jumped ahead. I have not read the Corvinus novels in order. There's a huge number of them. There's 24 of them. I haven't read them in order. And I didn't really care. They're really good at being their own little worlds, so you don't need to read them in order. And so I just picked one at random to finish out Private Eye in July. I picked Dead Men's Sandals, which is late in the series. I don't remember exactly how late, but it's late in the series. Where this is a perfect example of why I'm cheating. There's a man named Eutacticus who is a crime boss in Rome. And Marcus Corvinus and his wife have just got back from a vacation. Of course, they met murder and mayhem on that vacation, but they've just got back home. They barely unpacked their belongings when suddenly this crime boss sends them to Brundisium, a Roman port, to look after something, to look into the murder of a crime boss there who was found face down in the harbor, and also to look into what happened to a particular ring that he had, which the Eutacticus, when he's briefing Corvinus on the limited amount of facts that you're going to need to know to go there as my agent and find out what happened, he barely says anything about the ring, so you know it's incredibly important. And sure enough, it takes 2 weeks for Corvinus and his party to get to Brundisium, but when they do get there, he wants to talk right away with the surviving crime bosses. And two people, one on the road to Brundisium and one of those crime bosses in Brundisium, both tell him the same thing. When he's naturally sniffing around. He's coarse, he's rude. I don't know why a lot of the characters in the books that I've read put up with him. I really don't know why they don't just deck him and not have anything to do with him. He doesn't appear all that good at detecting things. Most of that comes from his wife. But either way, when he talks to these people, two people that he talks to who know the score on the ground in Brundisium tell him the same thing. They tell him lots of different things, but they both hit the same note on one thing, which is that it simply cannot be that crime boss was killed by another crime boss. That's not how we do things here. Two people say that to him in the exact same words. That's not how we do things. That is absolutely not done. Warnings, sure. Double dealings, sure. Backstabbing, sure, but not murder. We don't kill each other in business rivalries. Otherwise, we would have a gang war, which screws everyone over. So we don't do it. It's just not done. Now, right away, in Corvinus's mind, and also in your mind, and in the mind of any practiced Private Eye reader, you're going to think two alternatives. When you hear that from two people who don't know that each other is saying it, in other words, they haven't rehearsed it, you're going to think two things, two possibilities. One, someone in the narrative who is part of the world of the underworld in Brundisium doesn't care how things are done, how things are normally done. Or two, it's an outsider to that world, who not only doesn't care, but doesn't know that isn't done, that's not the way things are done. So, and of course David Wishart knows that. He knows that you know that as well as he does, as well as Corvinus does. Corvinus comes to those two conclusions in about 5 seconds. since David Wishart knows that you know that, he makes sure to provide you with characters that fit both those descriptions to keep you guessing. And I loved it. I don't think I've ever read this one before, but I loved it. And it has made me want to do what I have been doing in all of 2025, which is to go to the beginning of the Corvinus books and read them in numerical order. And that's what I'm going to do. Not for Private Eye July, because I'm out of days for Private Eye in July, but for the rest of the year, I will add to the list of PI novels that I am reading in order, no matter how long the series is. And I call this a PI novel because everything else fits. I mean, Corvinus he has taken a commission to solve a crime. He can expect a financial reward at the end, or at the very least the cancellation of a financial debt. I consider that to be good enough. I mean, at the time when David Wishart was writing about the Brundisium did have a rudimentary police force. If Eutacticus really wanted just an official resolution of this problem, he could have gone through official channels, and he doesn't. He hires someone instead. And that's the hallmark of a private eye, whether it's called that or not in our modern lingo. Although why it's not, I don't know, because David Wishart he faces the same dilemma that all writers of historical fiction do. Do you make the characters sound and think like they did in their own time to give you, the reader, a sense of historical verisimilitude? Or do you make them sound like people do in our time to make you feel like you're not so much an outsider to a historical world you might not know as well as the author does? Either one of those approaches is legitimate. It's just, if you're going to write historical fiction, you have to decide what you're going to do. I have read hundreds of examples of writers of historical fiction who think if they just maybe stick a middle line between those two, they'll be all right. It doesn't work. You have to decide one way or the other. Either your characters are going to talk and think in the patois of their day, or they're going to talk and think in the patois of your day. And David Wishart very much makes these characters talk in the lingo and the mind frame of our day, to the point where, at one point, Corvinus is talking, he's rehearsing, he revises with his wife everything that he's learned. They keep each other up to date on the case. It's actually a really good way to do that. In a private eye story, a novel, you really do need to periodically stop and let the reader get their bearings, rehearse for them what we know so far. It's easy to do in some of the novels that I have been reading, some of the private eye novels that I've been reading, much harder to do in others. If the private eye works completely alone, it's virtually impossible to do. But Corvinus doesn't work alone. He has his wife with him. So he gets to rehearse things. And in one of those rehearsals, he says, well, I thought things were going fine until so-and-so dropped a bomb on all of our proceedings. And I'm thinking, dropped a what? Dropped a bomb? Whoa. You bring a bomb around a baby? You just, by the time you're reading, halfway through one of these, much less, I probably read 10 of these books, your reading mind just assimilates that completely. I think you would have to be a pretty stick-up-the-butt purist to turn down the sheer reading fun of these books just because of the anachronisms. I think that you wouldn't be the kind of reader that I don't think David Wishart would want. And there's also a deceptive amount of research here. A deceptive amount of it in the little details. I noticed little details that your reading eye, if you don't know the minute details of ancient Rome, your reading eye will gloss right over them, but they are accurate. The language might not be, the mind frame might not be, but this was delightful. Now, I say that even though, like most of the novels that I have read for Private Eye in July, like most of the Private Eye fiction that I've read in 2025, this was delightful even though it wasn't long before I knew how it was going to end, before I knew exactly where to look. A good Private Eye writer, like a good mystery writer, will leave you little clues. They definitely want you to be paying attention, and they're willing to pay the price if you pay so much attention that you figure out what they're doing. They're willing to do that. They're willing to pay that price, and some of them are better than others. David Wishart has been better at that than in other books than he is in this one. One clue in particular, one little moment that he drops about a third of the way through here, pretty much gives the game away. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe not. I only know one person who's read this book, and for her it did not give the game away. She had no idea. There was a twist at the end of the book that genuinely caught her by surprise. And I won't say, Wishart's usually very good at it. He's good at it in this book. It's just that one detail opened the door to other details that made me think, okay. I know there's, like I said, there's one of two ways that you can resolve this. I now know which way you're going to do it, so I can eliminate one whole category of possible suspects and just look at the others. I'm not saying that he's bad at it. When it comes to ancient Roman historical murder mysteries, Stephen Saylor is really bad at that. He drops the hints, but he drops them like anchors. You can't miss them. He makes sure that you are paying attention to those dropped hints, to the detriment of your enjoyment of whodunit. But his writing is so good that I don't care. Here, you're not dealing with that level of prose, but it's still wonderful, funny, and edge of your seat and violent. I had a blast. So I ended Private Eye July on a strong note, on a very strong note. Not only a book that I really enjoyed reading, but also a channel marker, because I'm not going to stop reading private eye fiction in 2025. So now that I've reread, I think this was the first read, Dead Men's Sandals. I'm going to go back to the first Marcus Corvinus novel and just read straight through. Just read them right to the end. The Corvinus novels start with actual historical murder mysteries, with actual historical mysteries, if you want to call them that. What happened to the Roman poet Ovid? Why was he banished from Rome? And maybe was he killed? What happened to the Prince Germanicus? Did he die of natural causes, or has been the rumor for 2,000 years and was the linchpin of I, Claudius by Robert Graves? Was he murdered? What about Tiberius's henchman Sejanus? What about if there was murder involved, with betrayal involved? With, of course, Sejanus was murdered in an appropriately gruesome way. But what if there was a mystery involved in that? The early Corvinus novels do that sort of thing, and then they move to entirely made up things like Dead Man's Sandals or The Races, White Murder, or whatnot. And I think I'm just going to go back and read them all in order, just munch them down one after another. I'm doing that with a few other series, so. I won't say goodbye to Private Eye Fiction, but I do say goodbye to this event, which I really enjoyed. So I hope you enjoyed it as well. I've really enjoyed all the other videos that I've seen. And I'm gonna wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.